room who would like to take to the stage, now's your time. If not, hello everyone, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the second forum of this year's AMS election season. We've got candidates for Board of Governors, VP Academic and University Affairs, VP External, and VP Administration debating today. My name is Annabella McElroy. I'm the coordinating editor of the UBC, your campus newspaper, and I will be moderating. Before we start today's debate, I'd like to acknowledge that we're gathered today on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Hunkaminam-speaking Musqueam peoples. Now we'll get started with the Board of Governors debate. First things first, a reminder of the rules. I think you've mostly got the drill by now, but each candidate will be given a 1-minute opening and closing statement. Candidates each receive 45 seconds to answer moderator questions, and after you've all given your initial response, you'll get an additional 30 seconds to respond, or rebut what other candidates have said. Please raise your hand to indicate you want to speak during that additional time. You cannot use it, but you can only speak once during the additional response time, and you cannot ask another candidate a question with that time. Audience questions can be submitted in advance. Can they be submitted on paper today?
Yeah, in a couple minutes.
Or on a paper in the back of the room. And candidates, please only start speaking once I've talked to you, or once I have called on you. So sorry, just getting in the groove. I'll let you know how long you have to respond, and give you a 15-second and a 5-second warning. Please stop talking when your time is up, otherwise time will be deducted from future answers. Any questions about the rules? Great. Okay, last housekeeping note, we'll be live tweeting the debates at UBC News on Twitter. You can check out UBC Humor for funny tweets. And we'll be publishing recaps of the debate on ubc.ca/news tomorrow. With that said, we'll get started with opening statements. Ashana, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, hi everyone, thanks so much. This is better turnout than previous years actually, because for the BOG debate. So my name is Ashana and I'm running to be re-elected as your student governor. Over the past few years, I've fought for you as your student senator for 3 years, AMS VP Academic and University Affairs, and the AMS president. During this time, I've been able to get some really big wins for students, including $11 million for financial aid, $1.5 million to upgrade lecture capture technology, $2.7 million for food security over 2 years, and $2.3 million for student health. I think I've proven time and time again that I'm sorry, I'm so tired today. I'm consistent, sincere, and that I deliver on the promises that I make to you. And I hope I can count on your support, and I'm looking forward to chatting with the other candidates today.
Thank you. Kamal, go ahead.
Hi everyone, hope you're all doing well. My name is Camille, and I'm ready to be your next, one of your next student governors on the Board of Governors. This past year, I served as your Vice President Academic and University Affairs at the AMS, as well as your student senator at large. Just some of the things that I was able to accomplish for you, securing $500,000 from the university to go towards restoring the AMS GSS mental health coverage to 100% per visit. It's the first time ever that the university has signed on to the health and dental plan. Securing an $18,000 to $24,000 increase in minimum funding packages for every PhD student, along with our friends at the GSS. Securing $300,000 to go towards funding a new multidisciplinary undergrad research program. Securing $450,000 for the AMS food bank, $400,000 for the Center for Accessibility, and even more for open educational resources. As your next student representative to the UBC board, some of the things that we'll continue to focus on are opposing tuition increases through continued conversation with governors and finding alternative revenue sources, ensuring greater budgetary allocations towards food security initiatives, and greater budgetary allocations towards financial aid. You can learn more at votecamille.com.
Hey besties, I'm Jasper, I use them pronouns, and I'm running for board to fight on affordability, housing, and divestment. So I think, as everyone knows, UBC has a massive affordability issue. On-campus housing has increased by up to 8% this year, tuition up to 5%, and then the land use plan only set out to build 33 new student beds while building almost 10,000 new units of neighborhood housing. And this is all happening while students are starving, food bank usage is going up exponentially, and it's a massive problem. And then at the same time, the money that UBC does have is being used to fund the fossil fuel crisis, human rights abuses around the world. So if elected, I want to both fight the affordability issue with housing and tuition freezes to build more housing by amending the land use plan, and then also divesting from companies that contribute to human rights abuses, and hold UBC accountable to its promises to finish divesting from fossil fuels by divesting other funds and by divesting other asset classes. So vote for me for affordability, housing, and ethics. Thank you.
Thanks very much, candidates. Now we'll start with moderator questions. First question, tuition increases get approved year after year, even though students overwhelmingly oppose them. What is your position on tuition increases, and what would implementing that plan look like if you were elected or re-elected? We'll start with Camille.
Yeah, I think a lot of students share this position, and that's obviously tuition increases are very harmful considering the affordability crisis that we're currently facing on this campus. However, it always is a challenge, I think, for advocates across the board to really prevent those from happening. This year we spent a lot of time meeting individually with governors and lobbying them, which is why I think we got so close to the tuition vote failing. However, I think in terms of ensuring the plan, I think one is ensuring the development of a multi-year tuition framework to make sure we're being cognizant of what increases may look like in the future, continuing work to individually lobby governors and presenting them strong affordability arguments, and amending LR4 to be more realistic and transparent in how students are surveyed, and continuing to provide direction to the Vice President External Relations Office to advocate for the province for greater funding beyond general wage increase provided through operating grants to reduce the pressure from tuition increases.
Go ahead.
I mean, yeah, so it's my platform. I do want to freeze tuition increases right now. There's a massive affordability issue, but I think more importantly, we've been seeing a trend on the board where more and more people are voting to not increase tuition, right? Last year was the closest, including with 3 appointed governors that we've seen in a very long time. That was, I think, showing that there's a trend there. So I think UBC needs to recognize that and start looking to other funding opportunities, including through the province, to make sure that we can both keep UBC running, but also realize that we cannot keep this sustainably right now.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, nothing to disagree with over there when it comes to tuition increases and the difficulty they cause for students. I was the only member of UBC's finance committee to vote no to the tuition increases this year, which was obviously very disheartening. But after that, I was able to leverage some relationships with governors and make a strong case that tuition should not be increased, which I think that did contribute significantly to the reason we saw such a large number of governors vote no this year, including the Chancellor. So in the future years, I think something that's also important to focus on is ensuring that there's equivalent amount of needs-based aid to provide to students in this time when tuition increases. So yeah, I think what I would focus on is expanding the eligibility to include international students in LR10 and just overall increase the financial aid contribution for needs-based aid for continuing students.
Would anyone like to use their additional response time? Go ahead. 30 seconds.
Yeah, to expand on that, I'd also advocate to the province to lift a moratorium that prohibits the university from borrowing funds externally to finance student housing. I think we lose a lot of money that gets stuck that could be used for financial aid and other student priorities, including addressing the affordability crisis. So I have been working on that this year alongside other governors and members of the UBC administration. We have made progress, and I want to continue doing that once I'm re-elected to the board. I think that'll get us some real long-term results.
Yeah, I think agreeing with sort of lifting the moratorium, and actually we've done a lot of work this year working with both student housing and community services to present sort of the business case to the province as to why borrowing for the marketplace should be continued to be allowed, or why that should be re-allowed, and we actually successfully have gotten the province to stop using language related to the moratorium. The province is now actually open to borrowing from the marketplace, but it's something that will require a solid business vision. It's something that we're working consistently, or we work consistently with the university to actually get across this year, and we're very hopeful and very fruitful to sort of see what comes from that over the next couple of years.
Okay, we'll move on to the next question. If elected, what committees would you like to sit on and why? We'll start with Jasper.
I'm going to give everyone's favorite answer, Finance Committee. So a lot of the really important work that happens on the Board of Governors does come out of the Finance Committee. If you look at my platform, things about the tuition freeze, but also things like divestment all would come out of the Finance Committee. I think that's really important. But another thing somewhat related to that is I would try to get the Climate Action Committee recreated. So it was killed in 2023 and all the powers of war transferred over to the Finance Committee, and I have a massive issue with, a bunch of finance pros being appointed to the Finance Committee and then being expected to deal with the climate crisis. So that was something I would like to change, and I would like to sit on that committee again as well.
Yeah, I'd like to continue serving on Finance Committee, and I'd also like to join Property Committee. I haven't been able to serve on that, although I was on the Campus Vision 2050 Committee, and over there I was able to use my role to get campus and community planning to include the fact that the 3,300 beds is now a minimum target, and that they have admittedly and in writing retained the physical capacity to build more as soon as more financing is available. So I'd like to continue on the finance committee, get a seat on property committee, and ensure that I'm addressing the affordability crisis and the housing crisis that students find themselves in the middle of using those two roles. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not a surprise. I'd also like to serve on the finance committee, as well as the property committee and the governance committee. I think sort of all three of those provide a really good balance that just where some of the most vital work of the board occurs, whether that is related to sort of the tuition and the university's budget, whether that's related to you know, how the board operates in relation to its committee allocations or its relation to other governors, and then as well as the property committee, continuing work there to continue work that we've done in raising the minimum number of beds that we also work to successfully secure this year.
Would anyone like to use their additional response time? Okay, let's move on to the next question. Some students want UBC to engage in financial divestment from companies complicit in human rights violations. In particular, one referendum, which is petitioning to be on the ballot, calls on UBC to divest from companies complicit in Palestinian human rights violations. What is your position on that advocacy? We'll start with Ashana.
Yeah, so during my time at the AMS did actually send submissions to the Board of Governors asking them to divest from some of these companies. What that ended up doing was that Santa Ono released a university-wide statement, and the efforts were completely unsuccessful. So what I would do instead is I would try to take a broad-based approach of trying to include human rights violations in all companies that are complicit in human rights violations in UBC's investment criteria, which I think will actually yield results for what students are looking for and what they're asking for. Because currently it's very difficult and unfeasible to try and get the university to buy in and commit to divesting based on the criteria that's set out. So the one way I see that actually being tangible, and my focus is really on delivering results, is to include it in the investment criteria overall and just target all companies to do that.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's very much what my answers would be. But I think, you know, continuing work in relation to making sure the board continues its work to committing to ESG principles as well within the investment criteria, as well as generally when we talk about divestment, making sure that we're taking an approach that is holistic and that is all-encompassing. You know, we saw a similar approach taken when we were looking at divesting from fossil fuels, and successfully secured that commitment for 2030. And so I think implementing a similar mechanism and making sure that we're being, you know, equal across the board in the way that we approach investment, I think is the key to making sure that is something that successfully occurs.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what was said here. I do also want to add, though, that I think things have changed a lot since 2022, when the last divestment motion came out of AMS Council. If you're looking at Palestine and Gaza, the amount of life lost there is incomprehensible. And when you look at that, I think that you do have to realize that the climate has changed since 2022, since Santa Ono made that statement. And I think that the appetite is certainly much more there, and I think that needs to be recognized as well.
Would anyone like to use their additional response time? Move on to the next question. None of the candidates at the debate today are graduate students. So what do you think the Board of Governors could do better for graduate students? And as an undergrad, how would you ensure that you're able to stay in touch with what they need? We'll start with Camille.
Yeah, you know, I think I've spent a lot of time in my work with the AMS as well as on Senate working very closely with graduate students. You know, we successfully this year actually got the increase for minimum funding for PhD students to increase from $18,000 to $24,000. And so I think continued work in that realm and continuing collaborations across the board with graduate students and the relationships that we have to make sure those interests are heard and those interests are implemented across the board, and really making sure that, you know, one thing that I think we can really look at is implementing minimum funding for master's students. That's something that is a large desire amongst graduate students, and in conversations with the GSS, is something that I know we would like to see happen across the board. It requires a large financial investment and commitment, but I've shown that, you know, I was actually able to secure that commitment earlier for PhD students, and so I'm very confident that we'd be able to move in that direction for master's students as well.
Yeah, so through my work through DUC, the Disabilities United Collective, I've done a lot of advocacy work on specifically the Joint Board and Senate Policy LR7. And one thing that I found through working with graduate students is that UBC's disability accommodation policy is very, very much tailored to undergrad students, and there are a lot of issues with how that works for people in the graduate students, people in labs. So I have worked pretty closely with a lot of disabled graduate students and some disabled graduate student organizations. I have those connections, I've been working with them, and there's a lot of changes that need to be made there, and I would like to continue that. I also agree with what Camille said about funding. The work that the AMS have done to advocate for increased PhD funding is great, but it's still pretty low nationwide, and I think that needs to be increased as well.
Yeah, of course, agreeing with what the other two candidates have said. But in addition to that, firstly, I think when we're elected, it's very important to recognize while we're undergraduate students, we represent all 60,000 plus UBC Vancouver students. I've built some strong relationships with the Graduate Student Society over the past few years, which also means that I've been able to learn a lot when it comes to what impacts graduate students and have developed an ability to work with them. So of course I would continue really relying on them to see what they would like to see out of the board. But some things I know they've been raising for years is some more accountability for supervisors when it comes to graduate student and supervisory relationships. There's a lot of problems over there that negatively impact grad students' mental health, their academic experience, and just like quality of their campus experience. And childcare spaces, and of course, grad students make up 52% of the users of the food bank, despite only being 22% of the population. So I'd really focus on food security as well.
Thank you. Would any of you like to use your additional response time? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think really the key is making sure that we're listening exactly to what graduate students need. You know, and I think particularly that is the case again when we talk about sort of implementing funding for master students or students that are pursuing a master's degree. You know, we've heard time and time again from the GSS at their various board presentations that they've made to the board that is a strong desire that they'd like to see happen. And I think again I've shown sort of the commitment necessary to increase funding for graduate students, and so I hope to be able to continue to do that work if elected.
Another thing would be just increasing PhD tuition waivers. That's a conversation we've been having with UBC for a while, just has not happened. And also just trying to extend the childcare space times to align with UBC classes for graduate students who have to leave their dependents in those spaces. And I mean, they literally can't complete their education without their kids being taken care of during that time. So yeah.
Okay. With that, move on to the next question. Someone's phone in the room is on vibrate, so if you could deal with that, that would also be appreciated. Next question is, candidates, what do you think UBC should be prioritizing from the Student Affordability Task Force recommendations? We'll start with Jasper.
Yeah, so I think one of the most important recommendations there is increasing needs-based aid. So UBC does not have that much needs-based aid, and then you look at things like the Trek Scholarship, which then just got cut for students that are international. I think that that's a massive problem. We really do need to be making sure that UBC is allowing students to come here if they cannot necessarily afford, if they are going to help this institution become one of the best in the world, which we are. So I think really making sure that we can attract the best students to UBC.
Go ahead.
Yeah, as a primary author actually of the Student Affordability Task Force report, I am very happy to hear this, and it's very close to my heart. So I would definitely continue advocacy on holding the administration to account. I think there's a lot of things, specifically needs-based aid. Policy LR10, we've been talking about it for a year. I've brought it up several times at the UBC Board's Finance Committee this year as well. We do need to include international students, continuing international students, just to be very specific. In that criteria of who's eligible for need-based aid. So that's definitely one. Another one is just giving people more certainty, a multi-year tuition framework, as well as a multi-year cost calculator so students can really plan and budget instead of like these whiplash kind of changes that come every single year. So, but overall the whole task force needs to be, the whole report needs to be implemented. I'll focus on that. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I think the key is to make sure that we're implementing everything within the Student Affordability Task Force, and I've been a vital part of the Student Affordability Task Force Implementation Committee that's actually been responsible for a lot of that work, and we'll see an update come in March actually in relation to sort of all the great work that we've really been advocating the university to continue on. However, I think sort of specifically, I think when we look at sort of addressing the cost of living, particularly when it comes to food security, we've seen an investment made of $800,000, which has stayed pretty stagnant for the last couple of years. I think increasing that commitment, sort of seeing the drastic increase in sort of food security crisis that has occurred, the drastic increase in food bank usage, and making sure that we're acting on that, and then of course making sure that we're continuing work in developing our multi-year tuition framework and making sure that students are aware of sort of the tuition that they'll be paying. Ideally, it wouldn't be very high, but making sure that we're really committed to the development of that framework.
Go ahead. Oh, Jester, go ahead. Oh, sorry. Did I already go around this list? Oh my gosh, my bad. Sorry. Would anyone like to use their additional response time? Okay. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think another important thing is expanding need-based aid for continuing international students. Continuing international students actually have access to very small amounts of funding, and when we see sort of situations change for international students, really the only sort of outlet they have is emergency funding, which isn't always sufficient or has the criteria necessary to cover their needs. So one, expanding need-based aid without sort of compromising any of our merit-based aid that currently exists, but expanding the revenue pools that exist currently by increasing the allocation for financial aid for international students from 7.5% to 8% to make sure there's new revenue available to help support the money necessary to support their education.
Thank you. Okay. With that, we'll move on to the next question. When we talk about student politicians engaging with students, that can look like two things. That's talking to students to understand their needs and wants, but especially with Senate and Board of Governors, that could also mean explaining to students what you do and what those bodies do. Taking those two meanings of what it means to engage with students, do you think student engagement is an important part of your role if elected? And if so, how would you do so practically? We'll start with Ishana.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's important to keep students informed of what's going on. There's multiple channels for that. More than any type of student engagement, though, I just want to be clear, it is so much more important to deliver results and actually do the work. I have seen candidates over many years just focus on engagement, posting, just more and more and more posting, and not as many results. So student engagement is for sure important. How I would do that is really just make sure I'm engaging with all the elected representatives. Also, when you do run, you're running and you're talking to thousands of students, learning what they want you to fight for. So you're elected on a mandate, and it's important that you don't stray away from that mandate. So I would continue student engagement, of course, but more importantly, continue delivering results. That's the most important thing that students care about. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think student engagement is definitely important, and I think often one of the best ways to do that is by, one, just continuing to speak with people who sort of have expertise in the fields that you're sort of advocating for, whether that is graduate students with the GSS, whether that's sort of undergraduate students elected in various other capacities, whether that's AMS executives. As a vice president academic, I definitely know sort of the value of having a positive relationship with governors and making sure we're achieving student priorities. But I think in relation to communicating with students, I think students, I think there can often be some misinformation in relation to what the jurisdiction of the board and the Senate and all these complex bodies are, and I think using the communication channels that have sort of larger outreach already to help clarify some of those things, whether that's through UBC communications or AMS communications, I think is often a great way to communicate with students about sort of what is actually happening and what body is responsible for what.
Yeah, I do think communicating is important. I also think, again, it is more important to get the work done. I think that I should know what the students want and accomplish that, but if they don't know every little step along the way, I think that's also completely okay. I will say that, like, everyone's favorite micro-influencer, Kareem Assi, when he was on the Board of Governors, he still is, I read his Reddit post, big fan, love Reddit, so much fun, it's successful. But I do think that there is something to be said about little bite-sized pieces of information like that, and I think that as long as it's not the only thing you're doing, it's important as well.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. I think what's important, of course, is balance and making sure that you're being as transparent as possible and communicating as much as possible. But I really think what it comes down to is it's about getting the work done. And I think I've proven time and time again through various roles that I'm able to deliver for students, and I really hope to continue to be able to do that if elected, while of course continuing to maintain a level of transparency necessary for students to engage with, but really focus on getting the work done, whether that's hundreds of $1,000s for various initiatives, including accessibility, food security, graduate students. I know how to get things done, and I hope that comes through.
Go ahead.
Yeah, really important thing, I mean, I'll stand by that, of course, the most important thing is just to do the work, and students will see the result, they don't need to even know that you know, like all the nitty gritty of it. But the most important thing is doing data-driven advocacy, and students, I think, make very clear what they want to see from their student representatives. There are so many surveys with thousands and thousands of responses. The tuition consultation survey, while of course, the board doesn't seem to listen to the results of what they want on tuition, it does give a lot of valuable data on where they want the money to go. The academic experience survey, undergraduate societies run their own surveys, so the most important pillar that's always kind of guiding me is data-driven advocacy, and it's always yield results.
Moving on to the next question. We've heard in this debate and in your platforms that there are a lot of similar priorities, affordability and so on and so forth. So what sets you apart from your fellow candidates? We'll start with Kamal.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing that there's alignment of priorities because I think it means we know what students want. I think in relation to what sets me apart, I think there's a continued dedication to service. I think I've continued to serve students in various roles, as well as have a lot of experience to bring in advocating for students and knowing sort of how to get wins when you're really facing a very difficult system. Particularly this year, there's been a memo put out by the university that there's been no new budgetary ask from any units across the university, which has made advocacy particularly challenging, and yet I've still been able to secure over $1.9 million for student priorities in a year where that should be possible. And so I think knowing how to get things done in very difficult circumstances and in very tight financial circumstances is expertise that I bring, and will continue to do that if elected, because next year the budget will probably be facing a very similar situation, and knowing how to operate within some of those confines I think is very vital to the role.
Go ahead.
So when I looked at platforms, I think a lot of things that people added, and I haven't talked as much about right now, but I definitely consensus about is policy LR7, disability accommodation policy. It is up for review in the upcoming year, and this is something I've done a lot of work on. So I'm part of the Disabilities United Collective. I've worked with members of the Board of Governors, AUA, people on Senate, administration. I have been working very, very hard on these policies. I have the connections, I have the expertise. And I think it's really important, and specifically when it's a policy like this that only gets reviewed every 5 years, that you have someone on the board that understands it and has experience with it as well.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think when it comes to me, probably what sets me apart is just the track record of delivering wins over wins over wins for students. I was at the Senate debate last night, and I heard a lot of people talking about how they want to get the drop date extended permanently and that there's institutional precedent. I have to say that's probably one of my proudest wins. I did set that institutional precedent by getting that drop date extended without a W standing for the first time ever in the 2022 winter academic term. Over $13–14 million in terms of student financial aid going towards student priorities and whatnot. And all of this is, when you're the only student in the room, when they really don't want to listen to you, you still have to get the win and deliver results for students. So I think when it comes to what sets me apart is just clear, undoubted track record of delivering for students and my promises. Yeah.
But then maybe like to use your additional response time. Sounds good. Move on to another question. This one's a bit of a chunkier one, so I'm happy to repeat it. UBC has approved a new land use plan, housing action plan, and campus vision 2050 in this past year. If you just pick one of the three, tell me one thing that you like about it and one thing you'd want to change. Sort of all of UBC's land use and housing planning in the past year. So we will start with Jasper.
So one thing I want to talk about land use. One thing I do appreciate is that in conversation with the Musqueam, there was a request to not urbanize ridiculously heavily, and I understand that is a request that wants to be respected. But my then going to my complaint there is that with 9,500 neighborhood housing units being built, there would only be 3,300 new student beds, and I think that's really not a great ratio to be seeing for what is a school and not an organization that's just supposed to build a bunch of housing to sell at market. So I think the thing that's really more important here is that I understand the need to not urbanize super heavily, but you can still build more student housing and less neighborhood housing, and that's really what I want to see.
Yeah, I think one thing I do like is that we were able to secure the fact that that 3,300 target is now a minimum. I do want to highlight that the cost of building one student housing bed is $300,000 per bed, and the cost eventually does end up falling onto students through rent increases and other methods. So I'm very happy to see all the high density housing, because that is how UBC finances student housing and keeps the rates, although they're very expensive, as low as they claim they can. So what I would want to do is advocate for just more financing to be available, so we can live up to that statement that we made in the campus vision and land use plan, that the 3,300 target is a minimum and there's physical capacity to build more.
Yeah, I think similarly to some of the candidates, the commitment to 3,300 beds, I think, is movement in the right direction. I think to build all 3,300, I think the most recent cost projections are looking at about $1.5 billion, which obviously is a lot of money, and to be able to operate within that to build the housing beds, I think is something that we need to work on generally to make sure we can increase that commitment and find the money necessary, whether that's through new support programs from the federal government, or whether that's through new support programs from the provincial government, or the ability to borrow from the marketplace or external donors. But I think in terms of, I also really enjoyed sort of the addition of low barrier amenities that will be built to help support new neighborhoods that are being built across the campus.
Would anyone like to use their additional response time? Sounds good. Moving through the questions. Next thing up, the Board of Governors only meets in 5 cycles a year. So 5 main board meetings, obviously some more committee meetings. With that, how will you ensure your goals are realistic within the next year on the board? We'll start with Ashana.
Yeah, I think how I can make sure that they're realistic is, I've proven that I've been able to do that before. Last year I did say that I was going to make sure it's in writing that 3,300 number is a minimum, and I was able to accomplish that despite there only being 5. I don't even think I've been to. There's still 1 more meeting left in my current term as board as a governor. So I think I know exactly what is feasible and ambitious and still will yield positive impact for students. I think there are some policy reviews coming up that are a major opportunity. I think there is a fight that you need to continue, and almost always when it comes to advocacy, you can also really start and make progress on the work and make sure that the people who come after you can continue and bring it home, because at the end of the day, it's about impact for students and that students get the win. So yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think this past year proven particularly how to get things done within tight timelines and within very difficult timelines. As I mentioned earlier, the university has been very committed to the fact that there will be very minimal or very few to none new budgetary asks, and even despite that, we've gotten commitments for a number of priorities in ways that we've never seen before. $500,000 towards the AMS Health and Dental Plan. That's the first time ever that a university is committed to sign on to a student health and dental plan, and it's the first time that we've received such a large contribution, which has allowed us to get our mental health coverage back up to 100% per visit. Being able to do that in a very limited time frame is something that is unheard of and was quite ambitious when we initially set out to do it. So I think I've proven that I have the ability to do so. I know how to get that done, and I will continue to do that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's also really important to note that the work you do on the Board of Governors doesn't start and end when the meeting is happening, right? There's a lot of advocacy, there's a lot of communication, there's a lot of effort that goes in between those meetings, and I think it's really important to acknowledge that. It's really important to continue working with students and continue working with the AMS. It's not just the one meeting, and then you leave, and then you don't do anything else, right? You have to continue working, and I think that's the most important part.
Go ahead. 30 seconds.
I also think an important piece of that is the strength of the relationships you build along the way. And I've spent the last couple of years really investing in the relationships with the members of the board as well as members of the administration that work to get things done. The stronger relationships you have, the more legitimacy you're provided in a lot of those conversations, and the more sort of commitment and trust is placed in the things that you're saying and the priorities that you set. And with that, I know I've built a lot of trust to be able to get student priorities achieved, as indicated earlier. And I will continue to do that, continue to invest in those relationships to be able to get the work done for students.
Okay, move on to the next question. I think we'll have 2 or 3 more, see where the time's at, and then move on to closing statements. We don't need to take this on for another hour and a half. Next thing on my list, student governors can find themselves in disagreements with UBC administrators, appointed governors, or even faculty and staff elected governors. How would you manage fighting for student priorities with likely wanting to keep cordial relationships with your fellow governors? We'll start with Kamal.
Yeah, it's perfect. Well, last time somebody's first looked into this. I think it's a good thing when there's disagreement because it means that student governors are maintaining their responsibility as student governors and prioritizing student responsibilities. I think it goes back to the idea of relationships. I think you can disagree with governors, whereas I think there's a lot of trust placed in the relationships that you make along the way. And I think leaning on those relationships and leaning on that trust to still be able to get things done for students and coming to a place of understanding that what you're doing is what everyone is trying to do is making sure the university operates in the best interest of students and continue to reinforce that through those relationships that you build.
I absolutely agree. I think it's really important to recognize that despite there being a lot of disagreements, basically everyone there is there because they want to help students, right? There are going to be a lot of disagreements, and there always are. But through a lot of work I've been doing, a lot of the advocacy work I've been doing, I've been sitting in lots of meetings with people like Ainsley Carey or Janet Mee, or people, the co-directors of the CFA, and I tend to really disagree with a lot of things that they do, but I've been able to work with them, and I've been able to work with them to make some changes, and I think it's pretty easy to say, I disagree with you, and do that without, yelling at someone, right? It's important to have those relationships, but it's also important to disagree strongly, and I think I'm able to do that.
Yeah, I really like what Jasper said. It is very possible to disagree with people without, screaming at them and completely ruining relationships. At the end of the day, you're really there to fight for students, and they know that. And I think you actually earn more respect as a student representative when you fight harder. And at least that's what I've always seen. I've been at really strong adversarial points with the university at times. I've hosted protests against them, press conferences against them, released public letters criticizing them just on all sorts of things, and yet we're able to accomplish things for students. So I think the harder you fight for students, the more respect you gain, and respectful disagreement is always there. Yeah.
Would any of you like to use your additional response time? Sounds good. Okay. 5 to 6 million in student aid funding goes unspent each year. How will you make sure those funds go into student pockets? We'll start with Jasper. Sorry, just going through my notes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think as we've talked about before, needs-based aid is really important. Students, again, at UBC are facing a massive crisis. The food bank usage has been astronomical, and it keeps rising and it keeps rising, and we're not really seeing a stop to that. And we need to really recognize that UBC exists as an institution because it draws in some of the best people in the world, and we need to continue to make sure that we are doing that, and we're not just drawing in the people that can afford it. We need to make sure that everyone at UBC is here for a reason, and that we're allowing students to be here and exist and thrive. So I want to really make sure that we put as much money as possible into needs-based funding.
Yeah, actually, well, we brought that up during the Student Affordability Task Force as well. I almost wonder if it's, respectfully, if it's incompetence or if it's like intentional, how obscure the information is about how you can access all the financial aid on UBC's parts. Like websites are not very accessible for students. When a student is looking for financial aid, how they can get access to it, it really should be clear cut and straightforward, and it is not. So I think something I would focus on is, of course, from the universities and trying to make that process more clear, but on the other hand, if it is about promotion of it, and the aid that goes unused, I would leverage relationships with, of course, the AMS, but also undergraduate societies and AMS clubs to really promote those financial aid funds that are available and get students applying, get students using them. That they're there for students at the end of the day.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a great question. I've already started the work actually as we pay away to make sure we're working on some of the reallocation of some of that money. The $5 to $6 million that goes in spend is actually endowed awards, so it's very difficult to be able to allocate elsewhere without sort of working with the Office of the University Council, as well as going back to donors, or if donors decide, then going to the courts to get a judgment on how to reallocate some of that money. However, we've pushed very hard, and enrollment services, as well as us, and the developmental alumni engagement teams are all working very hard to figure out where best to allocate some of that money, particularly when it comes to need-based aid for continuing international students. I've brought that up time and time again, that continuing international students have access to very little funding, and this is a very great opportunity that exists to allocate money in that direction, and there's a large interest from the administration, thanks to the push and the work of my office this last year.
Would anyone like to use their additional response time? Go ahead.
I'm just going to say, I've been flying around UBC humor right now, and there's a quote that says, Jasper wants people to just be able to exist. I agree. Thank you.
Sounds good. Okay, I'm gonna move on to one audience question we had that didn't overlap with the ones that have already been asked. It's specifically for Kamal. Someone asked, you are the Vice President of the Student Legal Fund Society, or at least it appears so, a society which has not done anything this year. Why should students trust you in this role? Like, considering that. You have 30 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I can take some feedback on some of the lack of publicizing the work of the SLFS. I think that's definitely been an area for growth. However, I think the characterization that work hasn't been done is incorrect. You know, we've worked quite extensively to sign an MOU with the staff for $12,000 in relatively discretionary funding for legal cases. We're currently evaluating several applications that have come forward, and we're renegotiating a contract that's been signed with the LSLAP legal clinics as well as with AMS services to make legal services more accessible in terms of how I'll deliver, the same way that I delivered $1.9 million in half a year at BPA.
Thank you, candidate. With that, I think we will move on to closing statements for today. And we will see you next on Thursday. So, closing statements, as a reminder, you have 1 minute. And because of the last order we're in, we'll start with Ashana and just go left to right again. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope I've been able to prove that I have realistic goals and I'm going to be able to accomplish them for you. I really do. I have a sincere track record of being consistent and delivering on all the promises that I make to students. When I was VPAUA, I accomplished 100% of my goals. Very similar thing when I was named as president, and now as well as a student governor. So I hope I can count on your support, and make sure you vote on March 1st anyway, even if you don't vote for me, but obviously vote for me. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for everyone for showing up for this shorter debate, which I'm very happy about. You know, I think I have a proven track record of delivering time and time again for students, whether that's in the realm of graduate student support, mental health support, food security, or open education resources. And I think I will. I know that I'll continue to deliver if elected as your next student governor. My platform focuses on a number of things, including supporting international students as well as making life more affordable, whether that's in relation to housing, tuition, childcare, or the many other needs that students have. I know how to get things done in very difficult climates and in climates where securing wins for student priority should not be possible, and I hope to continue to be able to break ground on a lot of that work. Remember to vote for Camille, and you can learn more at www.votecamille.com.
Thank you. Last word to Jasper.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, I've been following around on UBC humor. I don't have like a fancy formal statement written out, but I'm just going to quote this. Jasper will actually work and not just go to meetings and take aesthetic notes. I agree, that's what I'm going to do. So to help me do that, vote for Jasper for affordability, ethics. There's something else. And affordability, ethics. Oh, this is fun. Excessive, no, it's not accessibility, that was the other one. Housing. Thanks, Ashana. This is what happens when you don't let me write statements.
Thank you all for coming to today's Board of Governors debates. As I said, they'll be back on Thursday for the great debate, and you can come back at 6 for the VPA UA debate. Thanks, everyone. and we will pick them up for today or the great debate. Audience questions, you'll have 30 seconds to respond to with no additional response time. As a reminder, candidates and volunteers on any campaign cannot ask audience questions. Candidates, please start speaking only once I call on you or nodded at you to say that you can start. I'll let you know how long you have to respond and give you a 15-second and 5-second warning. Please stop talking when your time is up. Failure to do so may result in time being deducted from future answers. Do you have any questions about the rules? Sounds good. As per usual, we'll be live tweeting the debates at UBC News on Twitter and at UBC Humor for jokes, not facts. Recaps of the debate can also be found tomorrow at ubc.ca. First things first, just to make sure you both have mics that are working, just left to right, if you just tell me your name, to make sure I have it down too.
Drayden Fontana.
Pasha Fashe.
Great. Okay, then we'll start with opening statements. Drayden, you have 1 minute.
Hey everyone. So just a bit about me first. I'm a fourth-year student getting a Bachelor of Arts in International Relations and a Bachelor of Applied Science and Electrical Engineering. My platform is centered around accessibility, affordability, and accountability. The reason I got involved in advocacy in the first place was I had a lot of difficulty getting diagnosed with ADHD at the university, getting accommodations from the CAP because of that, and food security that comes along with a lot of those challenges, not having a lot of money. For example, like I lost 30 pounds since I started, and I don't think anyone should have to go through what I went through at this university. So when I started getting involved in this advocacy, I really wanted to make actionable changes, so I have actionable goals to do that. And the experience that I bring to this portfolio, I have evidence of accomplishing those things. So some of those things are, I want to increase the food security initiative from 800,000 to 1.2 million annually. I want to allow students access to less of all accommodations, and I want to increase Campus Vision 2050 beds from 3,300 to 5,000.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Tashifa, pronouns she and her. UBC is committed to excellence, equity, and mutual respect. Or so they say. Are we really equitable when 57% of the students face financial hardship? Are we really respectful when 75% of our Black students are subject to discrimination? Are we really that excellent when over 40% of us are scared of running out of food? As your VP academic, it will be my goal to make sure that our needs are at the forefront of decision making. I'm working with the federal housing. I've helped nonprofits grow and talk to hundreds of students like you and I. And one thing I know is that behind every statistic, every policy, there is one of us with a unique story and a dream. So what I intend to offer each one of you is my time, my effort, and my dedication. I want to listen, and not just for the sake of it, but to truly acknowledge your concern and bring change. Thank you.
Thank you again. We'll go on to the first question. This year's BPAUA has asked UBC for funds to run the AMS food bank and supply mental health coverage on the AMS health and dental plan. Do you think this is a sustaining funding model for these two initiatives, and would you try to get it again? We'll start with Tashifa.
Sure. So we got an additional $500,000 in funding, but that was a one-time funding. What my platform advocates for is a long-term, consistent food, mental health, and food security and mental health funding plan, and that is something that a memorandum of understanding has been provided for, and I will continue to keep pushing for it because food security and mental health are increasing challenges on this campus. In fact, financial hardship is one of the biggest reason why people face mental health issues on our campus itself, so this is going to be one of my top priorities.
Thank you. Drayden, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that wherever we can, as Tashifa mentioned, as my opponent mentioned, a memorandum of understanding is very important. In order to be sustainable and to provide students with the resources that they need, we need to make plans so that can be long-term. So like I talked about in the my goal to increase the food security initiative from 800,000 to 1.2 million. What it doesn't mention there is that is not currently a memorandum of understanding. That's something that needs to be asked for every year, and I'm committed to implementing that so that it is consistent over time.
Would either of you like to use your additional response time? Okay, on to the next question. The VPAUA should be in touch with student needs to make sure advocacy reflects student priorities. How, practically, would you ensure that you are? We'll start with Drayden.
Yeah, I would say to stay in touch with student needs, you need to engage with students. That's talking about surveys. That's something that I've done with my work in the US. We've done a lot of surveys. It's also having conversation with students. I'm always in my office. I'm always talking to students, and that's something that I would encourage any AUA to do, is to continue to reach out and know the needs that students have. I also, from a personal perspective, know the needs that students have. Like I said, I'm neurodivergent. I have faced food security myself. There's a lot of ways that I know that we can improve the systems at UBC, and those are some of the ways that we can do it.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, so before I was running for this position, I decided to chat and see if there was even a need for someone like me to run for a position that has most likely been undervalued and looked down upon for the lack of accomplishments that have been going on for the past few years. And after talking to over 300 students, I realized that my operational skills, my strategy, and logistics are going to be a vital asset to this role. And I will continue to engage with student groups, not just through specific groups in general, but to students overall in random occasions to get the real perspective on what student needs are. And also being approachable is extremely important to me, because if people are not able to come and chat with you about what their concerns are, then there's no point of you being a student leader by yourself.
Thank you. Would either of you like to use your additional response time? Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say it's also really important to engage with certain affinity groups or resource groups, because certain people have very specific things that they can speak to from experience. Like I said, I have some experience with certain things, but I also can't speak on everything that people are facing. And so you need to talk to the people who are facing very specific issues in order to understand them properly. And so I would be reaching out to those people in particular.
My previous interactions have been with clubs that have good relationship with execs from a lot of clubs. I've talked to members of the food bank, the food hub, CFA students, and even doctors to understand their perspective on the systematic issues that we face together as a university, and I've learned that there's a capacity issue that we need to address.
Thank you, candidates. Next question. The Disabilities United Collective has called for changes to the Center for Accessibility. What improvements do you think UBC can and should prioritize? We'll start with Tashifa.
Yes, so LR7 has been a topic of debate for the past few months, and as it should be, because accommodating for short-term disabilities and incidents that happen is something that I will prioritize. Currently, there are only 13 advisors within the CFA, and each of them get 380 to 400 cases, and they invigilate 22,000 exams in a year, which is insane for a single small staff to handle. And so my key priority is going to be to increase the staff number from 13 to 20, which is also one of the budget priorities which was proposed this year, and also to create a separate subcommittee to target the short-term disabilities that students are facing. So we meet students where they are and not where they're facing a gap in our services.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you asked, because that is something that personally affects me. So there's a lot of things that the Disabilities United Collective brings forward, like implementing lecture capture technology in all possible teaching spaces, having hybrid lectures wherever possible for all required courses, so that we can make sure that all students who can't come to those classes in a lot of cases have access to those, have access to education. Right now, it's not open for all people. And again, what I spoke about earlier, having a list of accommodations. Right now, it's not really treating students with respect to say, oh, here are your things that we think that you need. Students should know the accommodations that they can possibly have.
Do you like to use your additional response time? Go ahead.
So this was one of the ideas proposed when I was having conversations with students who have been granted concessions by the CFA, and one of the ideas that came up was to have dedicated advisors. So something that already the scholarship teams do is they have dedicated advisors for special scholarships students, and this is something that we can implement on a broader scale for students, so each advisor gets a dedicated group of students, and so it just streamlines processes and makes efficient use of our staff and resources.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd also say something that hasn't necessarily been talked about as much is the possibility of adding things to the accommodations list as well, which I was actually at a committee this morning for the academic misconduct and talking about how generative AI is currently thought of and how it could be thought of, and it's possible that people who have limitations in the way that they can express themselves quickly could be using generative AI, and that could be implemented as an accommodation.
Thank you, candidates. I didn't mention this at the beginning of the debate, but because we're one candidate smaller than what was allocated, we'll be ending the debate a little shorter than 45 minutes. Next question. Tuition increases are approved by the Board of Governors year over year, even though students overwhelmingly oppose them. Of course, the BPAUA isn't on the board, but you do advocate to UBC on that front. Would you do anything differently? We'll start with Drayden.
Yeah, the process is obviously not working at the moment. Every time there's a survey and students say, no, we don't want to raise it, and they say, okay, we're going to raise it. So clearly it's broken. There needs to be a different process in which we consult. We need to be able to meet students where they're at. We need to be able to engage them, and we need the Board of Governors to understand where the students are at. If we keep doing it the way we are, just banging our heads against the wall and asking them for these things, or asking students whether they want to raise tuition and keep it the way it is, students are going to keep facing this affordability crisis, and the Board of Governors is going to seem to not care. That's the message that students get when they fill out a survey and they say, I can't afford for you to increase tuition, and they keep increasing tuition. Those things need to be implemented properly, and they need to be engaged with the students at every chance they can get.
Completely agree. As someone who's worked as a research assistant and completely believes in a data-backed policy approach, I think the question that we're asking students at the moment in the academic experience survey is wrong, because if you rationally ask someone if they want to increase their costs, of course they're going to say no. And when you take that argument to the board and be like, here, 90% of us said no, and their argument is going to be, yeah, of course they're going to say no, so we're going to increase the tuition anyway. So my approach here is to include to capture the capacity of students to pay tuition against their income better, and that's something that we need to improve through our questions and through our survey. The way we capture these information is going to be critical in our arguments and negotiations with the debate, with the board.
Additional response time? Drayden, go ahead.
Yeah, the other thing I would say on that as well is, working in my capacity as the VP Academic in the EUS, we do conduct surveys, and so we want to get an idea of what students need, students want, and we work with the AMS in bringing up their academic experience survey. And one of my goals as the VP Academic of the AMS would be to engage with constituencies more, because from faculty to faculty, there are different needs, and so it's really important to engage with those other constituencies to make sure that those surveys are happening with that in mind.
Go ahead.
One thing I would like to bring up is that what we've been doing this for the past few years also has had tremendous impact on students' relationship and their perception of UBC as a university itself, and it's completely deteriorated the relationship. And so one thing that I would also bring change to is to kind of convey transparently what these tuition increases are being used for, so students have a better understanding of where their money is going, and this is also going to help us develop a better relationship with the student body.
Candidates. Move on to the next question. The VPAUA needs to hold their ground against UBC administrators. What qualifies you for this part of the role? We'll start with Tasha.
So for those of you who do not know, I've been working with the federal housing for the past year. I advocate for student housing. I have advocated for better use of pronouns within the internal and external systems, and I'm the lead for Indigenous outreach. And in order to do that, as a 20-year-old in a room full of 50 to 60-year-olds, it's difficult. And I stand my ground, I am persuasive, and I stand on my own beliefs. And when you're someone who stands strong and is able to bring change, then change is gonna happen.
Yeah, so as I've mentioned before, I am currently the VP Academic for the EUS. I think it would be hypocritical of me to say that no one can go into an advocacy role without experience in the university. I didn't have a ton of experience coming into the role that I'm in now. What I would say is that coming into the role that I did now, if I had known as much as I did before this year, I know that I couldn't do what I want to do or what I expect myself to do in the role of VP Academic at the AMS with the knowledge that I have then. There's a lot of institutional knowledge that you aren't aware of if you haven't been involved in university advocacy. And when you want to stand your ground, you need to understand those things to be able to express yourself properly to faculty.
We had jazz yesterday, we've got opera in the background today. Would either of you like to use your additional response time? Go ahead.
To also bring this into perspective, I've been in conversation with UB students to have a improvement in the degree navigator that we have currently, and it's completely not intuitive. There's a weird blue color in it. Honestly, I don't like it. And so I'll propose a series of improvements, and through that I have institutional knowledge of how to go about changes like that within UBC.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on standing your ground with administrators. A lot of times it's about having good faith conversations. It's about making sure that even though sometimes you feel like the people don't care about you, engaging in that conversation as if they do, because when you come into a conversation and act like you don't care about students, they can sense that and they will give you nothing. I've done the advocacy in applied science, and what I've learned especially is that you need to engage with faculty properly. You need to treat them with the respect that they want in order to get the things that you want for students.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to a couple more questions and an audience question. Next question is, some students have demanded UBC divest from companies complicit in human rights violations. In particular, one referendum that's petitioning to be on this year's ballot calls on UBC to divest from companies complicit in Palestinian human rights violations. What is your position on that advocacy, and what would you push UBC to do? We'll start with Drayden.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. So part of my platform is talking about weapons producers. And I think it would be uncontroversial to say that an educational institution which was given an endowment by the provincial government to educate people and which learned how to use that to invest its money shouldn't use the investment that they were given to produce weapons. And so I think, again, it's talking about good faith conversations with the board. You know that you can't go to the board and say, we want to divest from this really long list of companies. But what you can do is start by saying, why are we invested in Raytheon? Why are we invested in Lockheed Martin? Like, if we took the $1.25 million in Lockheed Martin out, how many guns would not be produced? How many less people would die? I think those address that, and I think it's an actionable thing that we can do.
Go ahead.
Yeah, completely agree with my opponent here. The key challenge in these conversations is how to navigate through the financial commitments that we already have from a legal perspective and from a larger market perspective, and make better ethical decisions in terms of who our business partners are going to be. And I completely agree that divestment is one of the key goals that our university should be focusing on in the next coming years. And so what next companies do we seek partnership with, and what universities do we stay in connection with, need to align with our values and our ethics as a university.
Would either of you like to use your additional response time? Go ahead.
Yeah, I would also say on divestment, the university is already committed in their climate action plan to divest from fossil fuels by 2030. So we know that they've proven that the fiduciary duty of the board is more than just to produce a high return on investment with a low risk. So if that's the case, then and we know that there's a moral obligation to invest responsibly, then we know that they can also say, maybe we should invest in weapons.
Thank you, candidates. Next up, what are your top advocacy priorities for student affordability? We'll start with Toshiba.
Yeah, so something that I bring from my role within the federal housing is indeed knowledge of the housing programs, and that's going to be crucial over the next year in facilitating good negotiations in terms of our housing plans. And so within our housing action plan, currently it advocates for a higher university rental and ownership construction, and I will advocate for more micro units and shared units within the plan. And also it says that the market rental of the proportion of housing needs to go up by 15%. I believe that at least having 25% of housing that's rental is crucial for our students to be able to get affordable housing. At the moment, 47,000 of our students are paying a market rent, which is atrocious for being students. And so that's something I believe needs to change, and I will, again, my platform prioritizes consistent food security funding too.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I've talked a bit about food security initiatives already increasing from 800,000 to 1.2 million annually. I would also add a lot onto housing. So, Campus Vision 2050 committed to building 3,300, but based on current growth estimates, like that number should be 5,000. And supply demand prices are going to decrease if there's a higher supply of houses. So we need to have more beds for students. The other ways that we can do that is having housing. The federal government is providing loans for apartment construction, and the UBC needs to access those loans in order to build the things that we need them to build to bring those prices down.
Would you like to use your additional response time? Go ahead.
So the loan program that that Braden's talking about is called RCFI, and it offers a 50-year amortization, and it offers a fixed interest rate, which is something that's really important. And from internal conversations with the interim president, Michelle Tremblay, we've known that there's going to be increased student plans focused on housing. And something that was revealed in the 2022 board meeting was that 4 to 5 million of student financial aid last year went unspent. So it's going to be my goal to reallocate those funding and make sure that the students get the money that they so deeply need.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and also one of the things that we haven't really touched on here, we're talking a lot about UBC, what UBC can do. What we don't talk about a lot is what the local governments can do, and a lot of times that's the role of VP External, and I would work with the VP External and the AMS to advocate to municipalities, but essentially we need to rezone to more mid-rise housing to have more access to housing for students, and you have to lobby UBC to put pressure on those municipalities for that to happen.
Thank you, candidates. We'll have one last question for me, and then we'll have our one audience question and one closing statements. What would you do if elected to address sexualized violence on campus? We'll start with Drayden.
Yeah, that's a great question. So SC 17 is currently in review. There were a lot of problems with it previously. There's been a lot of work on it. I think that there are things that can be added to it, like having a policy for reapplying or sending a complaint again, because at the moment, if you are a victim of sexual violence and the person, the perpetrator is said that they're not guilty, you have no action for recourse. Essentially, it's a gap in the policy between the Senate being able to do reviews and the Board of Governors not being able to do reviews because of the non-academic misconduct. So that would be one of the major things that I would implement.
Go ahead.
As a survivor myself and as a person of color, I can say that the system has failed me multiple times. And so my goal is going to be creating trauma-informed, accessible resources, especially for BIPOC students, because from the investigation procedures that I've been through, my friends have been through, there's less people of color to represent our interests, and that's something that is unacceptable for a university as diverse as ours. And the second would be to increase capacity. In my conversations, I learned that there's, again, a system-wide capacity issue, which means there's staffing issues, there's resource issues. So advocating for consistent funding, improving and streamlining processes is going to be one of my key goals.
Thank you, candidates. Would either of you like to use your additional response time? Go ahead.
And something that I plan on targeting within the SESC is increasing in the capacity of the support groups themselves, also updating the website, because currently if you actually go on the support group website and try to click on any of those, it's going to show a 404 error, which is quite funny and not acceptable, and we really need to change that.
Okay. We'll move on to our one audience question. You mentioned when talking about the Center for Accessibility that there's a need to increase the number of disability advisors. An audience member asked how you plan on pushing UBC to hire disability advisors who can understand the experiences of being disabled, especially if there is a staffing shortage there. You have 30 seconds, and we'll start with Tashifa.
Sure, so this was already proposed in the 2023-24-25 budget priorities that advisors need to be increased from 13 to 20. And I also would like to bring some awareness about staffing issues, because this is such a rabbit hole, because if you have less staff, they're going to be overworked, they're going to be less motivated to work, and then when they leave, they can't even leave, and then you have to fill that gap, and that just completely is a disservice to all the students. So staffing issues is going to be my priority, and to advocate for funding is something that I will put pressure on with our board. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, I'm personally disabled. So a lot of times things, when you talk about your personal stories to people, it is a lot more effective in getting them to understand why these accommodations need to be changed, or why the CFA needs more advisors. When I tell them how difficult it is to get accommodations and to deal with the system the way it works right now, it's a lot easier for them to understand why the changes that we're talking about need to be implemented.
Thank you, candidates. Back. Oh, there's no additional response time for audience questions, but you'll be back for the great debate on Thursday. And for now, that's the end of our questions. So we'll move on to closing statements. You have 1 minute, I believe, which is in order. We'll start with Drayden. Go ahead.
Yeah, so again, I'd like to stress the importance, or stress my platform, which is to accessibility, affordability, and accountability. And I would like to go over again that these goals are actionable. Increasing the budget from 800,000 to 1.2 million is something that's actionable. Establishing a memorandum of understanding on that is actionable. And I would also like to stress my experience in this role. I've been in these conversations. I know I've spoken many times with the VP students. I've spoken with the faculty, the associate dean of the faculty of applied science. I've spoken to the deans of applied science. I'm also in both the faculty of applied science and the faculty of arts. I understand a wide range of the issues. I have a lot of different contexts in which I understand. I've sat on a lot of different committees, and I can get things done that I'm talking about getting done because I know how it's been done in the past.
Thank you. Go ahead.
As someone from a small city in India, coming to UBC was my dream come true, and in the past few years that I've spent here, I've learned both the strengths and challenges that we face as a community. And I'm not going to offer you outlandish promises, but what I do intend to do is have tangible action plans to improve support for all of our students, and this includes creating an EDI training course on Canvas, advocating for consistent food security and mental health funding, and providing better academic support, including advocating for syllabus during course registration. the experience that I bring to the table as an active member of our community, and my love for our student body and our university, and my desire to make it better for us all is why I am asking for your vote. Again, my name is Tashifa, I'm running for VP Academic, and you can follow my platform at Tashifa for VP Academic on Instagram. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. We'll see you both again on Thursday at the great debate right here. Oh, and VP External Debate starts in 15 minutes. Thank you. Each of you will be given a 1-minute opening statement and 1-minute closing statement. Candidates each receive 45 seconds to answer my moderator questions, and after you've all given your initial response, you'll receive an additional 30 seconds to add comments or rebut what the other candidates have said. During the additional response time, please raise your hand to indicate you want to speak. I'll call on you in the order I see your hand raised. Candidates can opt not to use your additional 30 seconds, but each candidate will only be able to speak once during that additional response time. You cannot ask another candidate a question during that time to keep things fair. Audience questions can be submitted on the AMS Instagram or on paper in the back of the room. You will have 30 seconds to respond to audience questions with no additional response time. As a reminder, candidates and volunteers cannot ask audience questions. Please only start speaking once I've called on you or nodded at you to indicate you can start. I'll let you know how long you have to respond and give you a 15-second and a 5-second warning. Candidates are expected to stop talking when your time is up, and failure to do so will result in time being deducted from future answers. Do you have any questions about the rules? Great. Last thing before we get started, as per usual, live tweeting the debates at UBC News on Twitter. For fun, not facts, check out at UBC Humor on Twitter, and recaps of the debates will be published on ubc.ca tomorrow. Do you want to just both test the mics are working and tell me your name?
Hello,
Yes.
Aisha.
Jake.
You can be slightly further from the mic for your answers. Great. Okay. We'll get started. Oh, and please make sure that your mics are off when you're not speaking. We'll get started with opening statements. Aisha, you're 1 minute.
Hi everyone, my name is Aisha. I'm running to be your next VP External. I have worked in all 3 different levels of government, and currently I'm the VP Arts Caucus with the Arts Undergraduate Society, and I've been AMS rep for the last 2 years. I'm also the AMS's Governance Committee Chair, so I like policy and I like governance. I am running so that the External Office can start pulling major wins for UBC students. So, what am I going to exactly do for you? Give me 3 months, let me cook, and we will have the business case proposal wrapped up for the SkyTrain, permanently lift the 20-hour work cap for international students, establish a non-repayable food security grant program with the province, push for rent cap for UBC student housing, continue working with the Disability United Collective on the Access for All campaign, advocate for the province to meet the 11 minimum standards for university policies on sexual violence across BC, and continue to fund the post-secondary student support program before 2024 to support Indigenous students pursuing post-secondary. I have concrete goals. I have a track record of working with student government and the literal government to fight for student wins. Help me stand on business by voting Aisha for VP External on March 1st. I'm so sorry, I have my own timer going.
Thanks for staying on time.
Sure.
Jake, you have 1 minute.
Hey everyone, thank you for spending your time with us tonight. My name is Jake, and I'm running for VP External. I have served as the VP External of a few other organizations, such as Rotary International, Rotary Club which I founded, as well as Drop the Puck for Mental Health. And through work as VP External with these organizations, I've raised over $215,000 for various charities. And so I want to bring that same skill suit that I've learned from those organizations to the role here. My platform is mainly surrounded around student wellness and safety, affordability, transit, and also advocacy. So you can find more about my platform at voteforjake.ca, which will be published tonight. And I'm looking forward to getting to know you all more. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. First question. Where do you think TransLink should be focusing its rapid transit efforts beyond the potential SkyTrain to UBC? We'll start with Jake. You have 45 seconds.
Well, I think one of the biggest transit things that need to be focused on right now is bus 480. There's a lot of students in Richmond that really relied on that transit route, and yes, you can get to campus through other means, but it takes a lot longer and it's a lot more indirect. I think bringing that bus 480 back pretty soon is not only feasible but necessary for students that are commuting from Richmond. So I'd say that's a priority, as well as the rapid transit routes along 41st and 49th Ave are also should be priorities as well. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, so recently the budget lockup happened, and within the $15.5 billion invested in transportation infrastructure, $454 million this fiscal year will be going towards the Broadway subway extension to Arbutus. However, we have no commitment from the provincial government on any other rapid transit lines, and that also includes the SkyTrain. It has to come up in the conversation. The 480 bus line is super important to bring back, but TransLink has said that we are operating at 100% capacity. So what do? I'm bringing forward actual campaign platform points in the sense that we need to lobby the federal government on the permanent transit fund so that we can actually increase the capacity of TransLink to begin with, to make sure that the routes that students are having difficulties with commuting to, such as Richmond, Surrey, and Delta, can feasibly happen.
Would either of you like to use your additional response time? Okay, we'll move on to the next question. The province launched a funding review for post-secondary institutions that has now essentially gone dormant. Would you try to bring it back, and do you think the way the province funds post-secondary institutions needs to change? We'll start with you, Aisha.
Yeah, the funding formula, the funding formula, there we go. The funding formula has been a very, very long conversation. I 100% agree that we need to partner with the Ministry of Advanced Education to relook at it. I think it's really important to consult students during this process to make sure that we understand where money needs to be prioritized when we do revamp during the consultations. I think a huge piece with the funding formula is also having somebody there who's going to consistently lobby for that formula to be looked at, because like you said, it's gone dormant. Because in the last 2 years being on council, I've seen the way the external portfolio has operated, and there has been barely any follow-up when it comes to it. So you need a VP external who's really going to push for the review to happen to begin with.
Thank you. Jake, go ahead.
Yeah, so from what I've heard, the operating grant hasn't been reviewed since the 90s. And so I really think it's time that we take another look at reviewing the formula that, you know, where is the money coming from for our university. I think this has led to a dependence that's way too large on international students, where international students, you know, are now paying such a large, you know, percentage of the university's budget overall. And so I think, you know, reviewing this formula will also take pressure off of international students and the amount that they have to pay to keep this whole thing running. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you, candidate. Would either of you like to use your additional response time? Okay. Could you turn off your microphone? And then we'll move on to the next question. BC's next annual budget was released last week. What's one thing you like in it, and one thing you'd advocate to be included next year? We'll start with Jake.
I think this relates to the last point, is that there was really not much about post-secondaries in this budget. And so I think it would have been nice to see a little bit more funding towards our post-secondaries. You know, again, this is coming back to our reliance on, you know, international students for so much funding. I think we really need our assistance from the government to give post-secondary institutions the money that we need to keep going. Thanks.
Yeah, I really disliked the budget that was released last week. There was no commitment to funding for the SkyTrain here at UBC, which I feel like is a dead horse that we're kicking. But there was no commitment from the provincial government. No more housing either. I think one of the things that I did like though was there was a new income tested tax credit for up to $400 per year for renters, and it will be awarding starting the 2023 calendar year. However, that's a band-aid solution for the affordability crisis that's currently going on, and there was no money invested in for sexualized and gender-based violence prevention as well, and that is something that the external office has been lobbying for year after year. But I do think that the budget needs to be looked at with the lens of how are we actually making life affordable for post-secondary students here at UBC.
Would either of you like to use your additional response time? Go ahead. Your 30
Yeah.
seconds.
Oh, sorry. There was a lack of comment around food security as well, and that's a huge issue on campus. We haven't really lobbied the provincial government to the extent that we could when it comes to having them invest and pull their weight with the food security campus that we have going on here at UBC, and there was no commitment to that either from the provincial government during the budget lockup that happened last week.
Thank you, candidates. Next question. What are your lobbying priorities for international students, and who specifically would you go to achieve them? We'll start with Aisha.
Yeah, for sure. So I think when you're talking about the WHO, like the Minister of Immigration, Mark Miller, and then it's really, really important for the federal aspect of it. So one of the things that I have listed out in my campaign is to amend the Canadian Experience Class Express Entry Program, so international students can count part-time employment experience while they are full-time students for their permanent residency, pushing the federal government to make the one-year pilot program lifting the 20-hour work cap for international students permanent. And then another piece that has to do directly with the federal government is ensuring that the federal government renews the Building on Success International Education Strategy that is set to end in 2024 and increases the budget to $165 million and $8 million per year for the next 5 years to reflect the current number of international students. And the province should be pulling their weight as well when it comes to funding the university so international students don't have to make up for that difference.
Go ahead.
I think something about this is also kind of relies on the universities to not be charging international students such increases per year. And so making sure that the university isn't increasing the tuition for international students by more than 2% per year, I think is something that we really need to focus on. And of course, this is a university priority, but this will also rely on making sure that we're getting enough funding from the provincial and federal government to keep these universities going without those increases. So I think especially just making sure that we're fair to students that are coming here thinking they're paying one price and that are then being priced out of their own degree without even being told about it beforehand is something that should be focused on. Thanks.
Would you like to use your additional response time? Okay, move on to the next question. The VP External Office can sometimes focus less on the University Neighborhood Association or Vancouver municipal politics. Where and how would you focus your efforts municipally? We'll start with Jake.
I think transit is, of course, a big thing municipally. The bus for 480, for example, is something that we can work locally to achieve. Other things, I guess, in the municipal sense of working with TransLink to ensure that they're getting the funding that they need to, provide these additional transit routes. So I think one of the things that we can work with the municipal government to do with this is a funding review of making sure that TransLink is getting enough funding in a local area.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so transit, of course, is a huge priority, but I'd like to draw attention to something else that actually the External Office this year has been working on advocating for, and that's with working with municipalities to increase funding to community-centric food banks with high student demographics in the greater Vancouver area. This is a really cool initiative because I know we have a food bank on campus, but a lot of students are commuters, including myself. I commute from downtown to all the way to UBC, which is not that far if you're from Surrey. But looking at areas where students are and working with the municipal government there, the municipalities, to increase the food bank funding there so that we're working to get to where students are at is really, really important. And I think that's an initiative that we can focus on. Transit is also super crucial, but that goes without saying that it is a collaborative project with the provincial government and the federal as well.
And as there's an event going on outside, if you need to take a couple extra seconds during your question, I won't be penalizing you. Obviously, if the door opens. Would either of you like to use your additional response time? Go ahead. I should be turn off the mic. Thanks.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on about, in the same sense of food banks, a lot of people, of course, are reliant on the UBC food bank, but I think also raising awareness for students to have a better understanding of the different food banks they can go to, because there are a lot around Vancouver, perhaps that might be closer to those students. And so I think programs raising awareness around that could be great on a local level as well. Thanks.
Okay, move on to the next question. As VP External, you need to be comfortable navigating every level of government. What experience do you have that qualifies you for this part of the role? We'll start with Aisha.
I've been waiting for this one, turn it up. So I started working in government when I was very, very young. I was 15. My first role was working with the city of Edmonton as a policy advisor. I helped create the safety and well-being policy there municipally, and I did a lot of consultation, so I know how to consult with communities. And then I moved on into the provincial lobbying/campaigning scene. So I worked with my party there to hold the current provincial election that just happened, so I understand how to actually lobby. Lobbying is, people say that it's a skill that can be learned, and it can be over time, but this position is not to learn the skill. It really is to have that skill and to bring it to the table, and that's what I do have. And then recently this summer, I interned with the federal government, specifically the Minister of Jobs and Economic Development. So that is a resource here, because I do think that we need to be able, from my time there, I learned that the AMS needs to have a bigger presence in Ottawa. We are seriously not lobbying the federal government enough, but I do bring that unique palette of working with all three different levels of government and then AMS governance as well to the table that I think is a really rare combo in students where we would be able to pull off really huge student wins with my experience.
Go ahead.
So my experience is not as extensive in terms of government, but I do have a large interest in local politics, and I do volunteer with my local MP in Vancouver Quadra as a correspondence volunteer. On top of that, I think there's a lot of other skills that I've learned through VP External of other organizations about just relationship building with external partners. I also took part in a petition and fundraising campaign to organize to repair my local recreation park. That was about 5 years ago. So there was some things that I certainly can take that experience and bring to this role. Thanks.
Lydia, would you like to use your additional response time? Okay, move on to the next question. UCRU is a lobbying group of student associations from Canada's biggest research institutions. Where do you see the organization's role if you were to be elected, and would you campaign to be a co-chair again? We'll start with Jake.
So from what I've heard, UCRU can sometimes not be very effective, and some people have, mentioned that there are inefficiencies within this organization. It could be brought up that perhaps another body could be put together, doing something similar to UCRU, but perhaps with a better model where there's more efficiencies and perhaps less balls being dropped. Yeah, I think it could be on the table to look into not necessarily relying on UCRU and perhaps starting a new organization. So yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I disagree with that. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. I know that there have been talks, being on council and listening to what the external portfolio has been up to for an informal lobby group. However, UCRU has been there for a while, and the AMS didn't leave CASA for no reason, and we're not paying that $60,000 to join the Observer. We will be joining the observership program if I do get elected. But UCRU is a really affordable way for us to be able to actually band together with the other big universities and create a space to lobby together. It's already there. I would be campaigning for chair again. I think it's important that UBC has a space where we are taking on the narrative and we're setting some of that precedent. I think the issue this year was that you need dedicated people in the space and people who are going to put in their time to make sure that UCRU works. And I do think that dedication is very vivid amongst other student unions across the country as well who are on UCRU. I know Federal Lobby Week is not happening this year with UCRU, but it will be, hopefully, fingers crossed, it will be next year, but I think UCRU is very valuable.
Would either of you like to use your additional response time? Okay, we'll do Jake, then Aisha.
Also, I'd just like to clarify from my previous statement that I'm not fully advocating for a departure of UCRU. I'm just leaving it on the table that, if we all collectively think that that would be the right decision, that's something I'm open to. Thanks.
Yeah, I'd just like to reassert again that UCRU is a very valuable resource. We shouldn't be throwing out years and years of work. But it has done effective lobbying. It's just that it's had a 1 or 2 off year. So it's important that we are mobilizing with other student unions across the country together in a structural way to prioritize federal lobbying.
Thank you, candidates. We'll move on to 2 audience questions and then to closing statements. As a reminder, you'll get 30 seconds with no additional response time for these. The first audience question is, the VP External's role involves working with elected officials who might not view student issues as important or worth addressing. How would you ensure that you and the AMS's advocacy are taken seriously? we will start with Aisha.
Oh God, have I been in spaces where you have not been taken seriously? I think that it's so important that when you're approaching these conversations with elected officials, that you hold your ground. Like at the end of the day, it is important to build relationships, and it's important to make sure that you're being respectful towards the MPs that you're working with, the MLAs, the city councilors. But we are a student union. We're here to fight for student rights. In my opinion, if you're walking out of there not having like your head against the door, and if you're walking out of there with a possible job opportunity, you're not doing your job properly. You're here to advocate for students, and that should be clear when you are meeting with MLAs and MPs. So I do think that
Thank you, candidate. Sorry, that's your time. It's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I think the best way to build relationships is through positive collaborations and, you know, nice, warm discussions with whoever we're working alongside to, you know, make sure that we have a similar understanding. Of course, this also involves, you know, advocating that, of course, the university population is going to be the workforce. This is a crucial part of our economy, a crucial part of politics, and you know, it's not to be taken lightly. Thanks.
We don't have additional response time for audience questions. We'll be back on Thursday for the great debate if you have anything else to add. Our second audience question is, which of the Students for Consent's culture's 11 minimum standards would you prioritize in your advocacy to government? We will start with Jake.
I think the biggest one that resonated with me is that victims shouldn't have to be in the same courtrooms as their abusers. I think that could be, you know, a re-traumatizing experience during, you know, court cases where, you know, people don't want to see the person who abused them, and I think that is, you know, one of the 11 minimum standards that really stood out to me is super important. Thanks.
Yeah, I think for me, it was the mandatory sexual violence training for decision makers. I think that when we're talking about the 11 minimum standards and how they're going to be applied to policy, it's also important to talk about how UBC is currently under review right now. I believe it's SC 17, but making sure, I think another point that really stuck out to me was the student advisory committee and having student voices actually like be at the forefront of shaping policy that directly affects them. But those would be the 2 points that directly like stood out to me while I was reading the policy and drafting up my platform.
Thank you, candidates. With that, we will move to closing statements. You have 1 minute. We will start with Aisha.
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate that I'm the only candidate on stage who has experience working with all 3 levels of government and the AMS, which is where students deserve a VP external who knows what they're talking about. In platforms, you often see buzzwords like accessibility, transparency, and advocacy, and that's why I made it a point this year to not use those words, not because I don't identify with them, but because it's important to show rather than tell what you are going to do, which is why my platform is excruciatingly detailed. If I haven't mentioned like a million times already, I have been on council for 2 years, which means I have approved and revised 2 years worth of exec goals. My platform are my goals. They're detailed because students deserve to know what exactly they'll be doing in office. What am I going to be doing in office? And I will be standing on my platform and on business to make sure that we get the SkyTrain, we increase financial aid, better fund and support sexualized violence resources on campus and Indigenous student supports, and make sure that we never ever see a increase of 8% ever again for student housing. Voting for me means standing on business for student wins. Thank you so much, and remember to vote Aisha on March 1st.
Thank you. You have 1 minute.
Hey everyone, again, thank you so much for coming out and listening to the debate today. I guess as you've seen, I do have a pretty solid understanding of the details and the issues at hand here. This is all stuff that I would really love to have a positive effect on and really affect change. So yeah, just to reiterate some of my experience, I've been VP external multiple times with different organizations, and through that I've raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for charities, and I plan on bringing that same skill set to this very position and really just expand and really bring to a whole new level all of the work that's already being done. So yeah, my platform is on student health and wellness, affordability, and various other things that you can find on my website, voteforjake.ca. again, thank you so much for coming, and I'll see you all around. Thanks.
Thank you, candidates. Our last debate of the night for VP Admin will start in 5 minutes, and we'll see.
So every donor, every volunteer, and everyone that took a loan.
I was doing SAC. I was like, where's Zora? And the teacher was like, she's taking photos. I was like, period.
Live stream did it already.
Oh my god.
Okay.
My Instagram is Romy Hunter. Love you guys so much. My name's Romina. I'm a fourth year international relations student at UBC. I'm graduating this year, BA 24. I speak Turkish, I speak a little bit of Farsi, I speak classical Arabic. What else? I was in art school with Sunshine. This is going to AMS account. Period. AMS account.
You're already on it. Wow. How was SAC?
It was good. I missed like the first. I missed all the meetings now because my other club is meeting at the same time. It's so bad. Okay.
Okay, John. Are you here? What are you doing? I'm going to go back to like watch. Hours. Okay. Yeah, but I'll see you.
Are you gonna be the good
Yeah, I'll be great.
We'll get started in a minute or two. Just waiting for people to get back.
I'm not the smartest. No Jack. Maybe the dumbest.
Let me know when you're ready. We kind of need those. I think we need this.
Got myself there.
Hi everyone, welcome to our last debate of the night for VP Administration. My name is Annabella. I'm the coordinating editor of the UBC, your campus newspaper, and I will be moderating tonight's debate. First, just a quick reminder of the rules. Each candidate will get a 1-minute opening statement and a 1-minute closing statement. You'll each get 45 seconds to answer my moderator questions, and once you've given your initial response, each get 30 seconds to add comment or rebut what other candidates have said. During that additional response time, please raise your hand to say that you want to speak. I'll call on you in the order your hand was raised. Candidates can opt not to use their additional 30 seconds, but each candidate is only able to speak once during that additional response time. So please don't ask other candidates questions with that additional response time to keep things fair. Audience questions can be submitted on the AMS Instagram or on paper in the back of the room. Audience questions you will have 30 seconds to respond to with no additional response time. As a reminder, candidates and volunteers on any campaign cannot ask audience questions. Candidates, please only start speaking once I've called on you or nodded at you. I'll let you know how long you have to respond and give you a 15-second and a 5-second warning. Please stop talking when your time is up. Failure to do so may result in time being deducted from your future answers. Do you have any questions about the rules? Okay, great. Last thing before we get started, we'll be live tweeting the debates at UBC News on Twitter. For fun, jokes, silliness, check out at UBC Humor on Twitter. And recaps of the debates will be published at ubc.ca tomorrow. If we could just go left to right, left to right, just to make sure that your microphones work, let me know your name.
Hi, my name's Kevin.
And my name is Amy.
Okay, and just housekeeping, if you could make sure your microphone is off when you're not speaking, that would be great. We'll start with opening statements. We're in that same order. Jay, if you have 1 minute.
Hi everyone, my name is Jay Soji. I'm a third-year student majoring in politics science and minoring in economics. And I'm also an athlete in a shooting sports discipline, which I'm taking a break from right now. I've been actively involved in the UBC clubs from the last 3 years. And from the last years, I've been running UBC Shooting Sports Club, which we started with a team of 10 and ended with a team of over 250 people last year. During my experience with the club, I've not only engaged with students, but also organizations outside, promoted and represented UBC. And I'm running for Vice President Administration because I feel there is a big disconnect between AMS and the students. Executives, we see them campaigning throughout the period that they have, but then they just sit in the offices, send emails to the clubs, and they need to focus on building a more collaborative relationship rather than having a transactional relationship.
Thank you. Kevin, go ahead.
Thank you. I embrace how university is so much more than just academics. It's about finding your community and enjoying yourself. It has taken 6 years of leadership with roles as Integrated Engineering President, UBC Thunderbikes Captain, and Design Team Advocacy Manager to learn how the AMS is supposed to support clubs. I am running for VP Admin to provide equitable and effective leadership that all students can see the impact of through lightning fast communication and action on all concerns, having an open door when anyone needs support, attending club meetings to proactively learn their issues, holding other execs accountable when their portfolios impact clubs, improving AMS businesses and spaces to better meet student needs, and enforcing sustainability with a data-focused approach. These are tangible and necessary goals that I have not seen implemented in previous administrations, and I hope to be your next VP Admin to champion support for student engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy, go ahead.
Hi everyone, my name is Amy. I'm in my third year. I'm in my third year studying philosophy here at UBC. I've been involved in the AMS for almost 2 years now, first as the Clubs and Commuters Engagement Coordinator, and now currently as the Club Administrator, so I've been working in the admin office for 2 years. My platform centers on enhancing student living and the student building, supporting clubs and subsidiaries, and upholding AMS sustainability efforts in alliance with ASAP 2026. I have interacted with students, club members, and constituencies, and I know what needs to be done in this office, and they've communicated that to me already, and I really am, making sure that it's reflected on my platform. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Move on to the first question. Clubsphere has been an intense week-long affair over the past couple of years. Do you think this was a worthwhile allocation of time, and would you continue it at that scale? We'll start with Kevin. You have 45 seconds.
Absolutely, and I actually think that it needs to be increased, the scale. The budget was positive by sponsors. However, I think it needs to be more inclusive. Mechanical Bowl is fun, but it only serves one person at a time, and it's not Super Dogs that will bring in hundreds of people. And I would also like to highlight performance groups, give students something to enjoy while they're there, and help club leaders with their recruitment. Thank you.
Amy, go ahead.
Yeah, so I've helped organize Clubs Fair for, again, 2 years now, and I really do see the positive impact that this event has on students. I do agree we really need to make it bigger. I want to expand it also to the field even, but also really having a club-centric approach when it comes to this. As my opponent has said, you know, Mechanical Bulls and the Super Dogs show was something great, but I think that we need more clubs to come perform and host drop-in activities that really fosters these student connections, like what we've seen through pot planting and also tote bag painting. So definitely do need to increase that.
Thank you. Jay, go ahead.
Yeah, I really think that all the Club Fair, Club Stays, it's something that actually shoots up the memberships of the club. And all we need to do is increase the size of the events and have something that attracts people to come and look at the clubs. Same thing, more collaboration with student clubs, having performances on site, attracting more sponsors and more shows. Super Dogs was a great success, but I feel this year, the club that I'm involved with, the performance was particularly low compared to the last year. But yeah.
Would any of you like to use your additional response time? Go ahead, 30 seconds.
Yeah, so there's a lot of feedback from the engagement zone summary from the second term Clubs Fair. And one thing specifically was that people needed it easier to find clubs and to know what they are. We need to ensure that, especially if we're having a bigger event, that it's clear for everyone to find these groups. Yeah, I think that's just important that we ensure clarity there.
Go ahead.
Yes, I agree with these big events. We definitely need a more detailed map. We had maps for Clubs Fair and Clubs Week, but those need to be, pushed out more. Also, we introduced low sensory hours for Clubs Week, and that garnered great, feedback. So continuing those, also introducing sensory kits for these overwhelming events is something that will make the event more accessible and inclusive for the future.
Okay. With that, we'll move on to the next question. The Disabilities United Collective has pushed the AMS to launch initiatives alleviating sensory stress in the nest. How would you expand or continue these efforts? We'll start with Amy.
Yeah, so we currently have 2 sensory rooms in the nest already, but I want to ensure that it's being refurbished and making sure that the space is, being used and being promoted. Also looking at ways in which we can expand this to other parts of the nest, seeing if we have spaces to do that. But yeah, it's mostly really just promoting what I think, promoting and refurbishing the place, because it's not really a known thing yet, I don't think. It hasn't been, promoted that greatly, so working with DAC and, the office to get that out to students.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I really think that it's not been promoted a lot, even sensory hours. I don't think the message reached out to the clubs correctly during the fairs and stuff, because it was kept from 11 to 12. The clubs fair starts at 11, and a lot of clubs don't even set up till 12. So there was a lot of missed opportunities there, which could have changed those hours to either the end. But yeah, I know that we do need to improve the already existing spaces in Nest, and a lot of consultation could be required.
Thank you. Go ahead.
There are over 400 clubs on campus, and the Nest is inherently a busy place. Just tonight, we heard the opera coming through our door. The important thing is that we treat every group and resource group and club as an individual group with their own unique needs and not clumped into one category. That means proactively working with them to figure out when they need these sensory hours the most and what other ways we can support them. Thank you.
Would anyone like to use their additional response time? Go ahead.
I also just want to say that with looking at how we can expand these sensory rooms, also looking at the NEST Safety and Inclusive Spaces review and making sure that's done annually and making sure that it's in collaboration with student groups such as DAC and the other research groups as well. And so seeing that opportunities, seeing collaboration within that is something that we need to do for sure.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to the next question. What's your vision for the Hatch Art Gallery if elected? What campus groups would you like to see your office collaborate with, and how? We'll start with Jay.
I would like to have more external partners coming to Hatch Art Gallery because it is for the students, but we also need to get external partners here just to get more sponsorships in, more money in, and having the gallery set up as a place to show people that there's involvement here. But yeah, that's it.
Go ahead.
I would like a focus on student initiatives at the Hatch Art Gallery. There are so many talented students, and I think we need to show off what campus has to offer and advertise who they are and what they can do. I would also like to collaborate more with the Vancouver Art Gallery and local artists, showcase student art with a collaboration, and bring something like the Inclusive Van Gogh experience here where it's more accessible for students. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was really impressed by what the Hatch has done this year. I really want to discover other immersive ways of showcasing art at the Hatch. We've had that this year with the different art that was made by students, but making sure that we also have programming there, workshops. So I know that they did a design project in downtown Vancouver, and having that sort of activities at the Hatch is something I want to be able to do. Also, leveraging the space as a storytelling platform. We saw that with spaces, we saw that with Climate Catharsis, making sure that that's being continued for the next year.
Would any of you like to use your additional response time? Okay, move on to the next question. The VP Administration Office has the most staff of any student executive. How would you manage a team with these wide-ranging priorities? We'll start with Kevin.
Yeah, so I've been a leader for multiple groups. I was captain of UBC Thunderbikes, which started a team of 5, and I grew it up to over 25 students over 4 years. I'm also integrated engineering president, managing a council of 23 members. It is not difficult to manage a team. The big thing is finding workers and people who are engaged and have similar goals of supporting, or for me, then supporting clubs and being proactive. I want people engaged who are knowledgeable with how clubs work. I am a club leader, and I want to be a leader for clubs, and I want to find similar people who can do that. In terms of actual management, there are a lot of strategies for ensuring effective timelines by using project management software and ensuring effective meeting minutes and deadlines. And I will implement those systems too as VP admin. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so in my first year, I was elected as first-year representative for the Arts Undergraduate Society, and I managed a team of around 8 to 10 people. And so I know that communication is really the one thing that needs to be, established in a group. Especially right now, I do work with a team of 8, and we have varying different responsibilities. And it's really important to ensure that everyone knows what's going on, so that you are a unified office. I definitely think that I want to echo what the opponent just said about these people or these individual students knowing what they're working with, so making sure that the transitions in the beginning of the year are gone through properly.
Thank you. Jay, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with both of them. So the most important thing is that the whole team has the same vision, that we know what we're working on, and then we need effective communication between the team, making sure every single member is being heard. And what I would like from the admin team next year is actually going out to events that the students, the resource groups, the constituencies are organizing, talking to the execs in person, asking them what's good about AMS right now, what's the thing you want to improve, what's something there needs to be changed, because we can be sending n numbers of surveys. No one's gonna tell you what exactly is happening because they don't believe we're listening to them. That's the main thing.
Would anyone like to use their additional response time? Okay, move on to the next question. I think it's been touched on a bit in previous answers, but to get to it directly, how direct should the VP administration's relationship with AMS clubs be? And would you change how this relationship has worked in the past year? We'll start with Amy.
Yeah, so, the VP administration office in general is, again, very direct with clubs, and so making sure that we're engaging, as, echoing again what my opponent said, is making sure that we're visiting these club events and making sure that, they see that we're actually supporting them, because I do agree, the AMS is very disconnected with student groups and student clubs, and so making sure that they know that we are working for them and we are supporting them in any way is something I do want to prioritize.
Okay, thank you. Jay, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think that AMS has, administration office has prioritized that in the last year. I've had multiple experiences with my club and other clubs whose requests have basically been ignored or just put on hold just because they didn't know someone in the AMS. And then we have, if you know anyone in the AMS, you submit a room booking, you'll get it the same day. And then there's clubs submitting room bookings, they're waiting for 1 month just to get a reply that, oh, this room is not available, do you want another one? So this is something that really needs to be looked at.
Thank you. Go ahead.
A big part of my platform is comprehensive club engagement. A big part of that, or the main focus of that, is effective communication and taking action on all concerns. The way I'm going to do that is by being proactive, by going to club meetings, going to their events. I plan to weekly attend a new club and see what their issues are before they become issues. I would also like to introduce a new social media promotion strategy to better utilize the AMS's reach with regular promotional videos of clubs' events as told by club members, and show off the amazing and diverse communities clubs have built. This would also include developing a new club's newsletter to enhance student engagement with a comprehensive list of upcoming events. Thank you.
Okay, would anyone like to use their additional response time? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I really want to ensure that, the admin office, if you've visited the AMS offices, is right outside of, the key card access space. So we are the face of the AMS, and that's where students come to us. So making sure that, next year being more accessible to students, continuing office hours, continuing sending out, student club newsletters, and promoting clubs is just something that shows clubs that we are engaging with them.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so one concern I've heard is, as Jay mentioned, you need to know someone in the AMS to get things done a lot of the time. And that's quite unfair, and it's not equitable to clubs. So I'm going to be that face to get to know leaders personally, and they're going to be able to reach out to me directly. Thank you.
Okay. We'll move on to the next question. What do you think needs to change about campus space, or do you think the AMS should seek out a new online platform? We'll start with Jay.
I think we need to eliminate campus space. There's no point of having so much burden on club execs that submit this stuff here, this stuff here. AMS needs to realize this. AMS execs are paid. Club execs are not. They're still putting 20 hours of their week, and they have to still go on Canvas to submit one thing, campus space to submit the other, and still it's not beneficial. There's no events that are being uploaded to campus space. AMS doesn't know how many members each club has. AMS doesn't know when club organized events, how do they organize, how many people attended. The main reason of this is that we're disconnected. If the administration is not themselves going out to clubs, knowing them personally, they're not going to be able to get clubs on board to participate in any of their initiatives.
Go ahead.
Yes, I would like to replace campus space. I came across a display card not too long ago that was meant for students to find clubs. It had a QR code that went to the AMS website to find clubs. That page then linked to campus space, where clubs, for the most part, didn't even have descriptions. What I would like is this dedicated web page to showcase all clubs in detail with photos, and to make them searchable by category, so people can really know who on campus exists and what communities they can find. Thank you.
Yeah, so I want to, part of my campaign point is to smoothen the transition out of campus space. So we are actually, pushing out the club's directory, which will be on the AMS website, which dedicates each club to its own, page, which is basically what campus space is. And also moving all the operations such as, renewals and elections onto Canvas, which we do for onboarding. The removal of campus space increases the total amount of funding distributed to clubs through the club's benefit fund. So taking for the club's benefit fund applications, so taking out campus space entirely does, support the fund and supports clubs. So
Thank you. Additional response time? Jay, you can start.
Yeah, I would say it all comes down to who's gonna get the stuff done. Clubs directory forms, they were sent out in August. The submissions, like every club submitted their description, what the club is about in August, and we still don't have it here. So we really need to think about why these small stuff, like it's taking so long, which would have been really beneficial to the clubs for increasing their engagement.
We'll move on to the next question. Students and AMS counselors have criticized the VP administration's office for delays in the Blue Chips relocation. How would you ensure delays like this don't happen and that contractors are held accountable for them? We'll start with Kevin.
I think it's a very specific issue that I don't really see coming up again. I think the most important part is whenever we're dealing with contracts is to really read the fine print and ensure that everything is tangible. On this regard, I would like to see some changes to some of the businesses. I think there are improvements that can be made. Porch and Flavor Lab are two unprofitable businesses out of all of the AMS ones, and I think there's a lot we can do to improve their profitability while maintaining sustainability and ethical practices. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy, go ahead.
Yeah, this is just bringing back transparency again and communications to students. I know that the Blue Chip renovation or expansion area, we keep saying a date and then it keeps getting pushed back, and I think that we should just be honest with ourselves and again reading the fine print and having a realistic timeline so that we're telling students one thing and not sort of putting a band-aid over it just so that we can push it back a couple weeks after. So that clear transparency, making sure that all the other departments are aligned as well with pushing that out is something that I want to prioritize for future projects and future expansions.
Thank you. Jay, go ahead.
Yep, I would say it's an issue that's not likely gonna rise again, but all it requires is better planning and having deadlines that are not too ambitious but achievable. And adding on to the food outlets, I think as administration, it's our responsibility increasing foot traffic and NIST, and we need to find ways to do that. And if our food outlets are not coming in to a profit, like Flavored Lab, it's nowhere near the track to be profitable right now. We need to really think that if it's worth spending that money here, where it could be spent on running food initiatives, food insecurity initiatives.
Would anyone like to use their additional response time? Okay, move on to one more question from me and then an audience question. What sustainability initiatives would you run in the nest, and are there any from previous years you'd like to bring back? We'll start with Amy.
Yeah, so with ASAP 2026 being approved this year, I was in that consultation meeting process, making sure that the goals and making sure that the goals are being aligned with the priorities and policies that are set out by the AMS. So this also includes aligning with the other sustainability groups on campus because again, there's this big disconnect on what UBC Sustainability Hub and CJUBC are doing and what the AMS is doing. So making sure, my goal is to unify that and to communicate that to students because students aren't aware of what's happening on campus and it's important work that has to be communicated.
Jay?
Yeah, I believe it's our responsibility to establish meaningful change. The previous execs have worked a lot on ASAP 2026 and we actually need to start working on implementation. And I would say My priority for the next year would be getting the climate week run better. It was a great initiative taken this year, but I feel it didn't reach the right audience. It wasn't marketed correctly. There should have been more information of it sent out to the clubs or partnered with the clubs. And yeah, a lot of focus on that, and then again, supporting every single club and resource group on fighting food insecurity, because I think that's a major issue.
Go ahead.
Shop Value is one of my all-time favorite companies. Felix Bach, the founder, is a UBC alum, and this company recycles chopsticks into furniture. We have a chopstick recycling program in the nest. However, there's no signage for it, and the boxes for the recycling are difficult to find. I would like to ensure that that is advanced and improved. And beyond that, I would like to ensure that we focus on a data-focused approach to sustainability in tracking waste and single-use items. Along with that would be ensuring the Interactive Sustainability Center is implemented as intended. I've looked at it, and during Sustainability Week, it seemed to be used as a storage space. There's no table, garbage cans were in the middle of the floor, and so I really want to make sure that that place is used as intended, showing the results that should be there. Thank you.
Would you like to use your additional response time? Go ahead.
Yeah, so sustainability, opening the ISC was a $24,000 price tag, and it really needs to be utilized more with workshops and programming within it. Also, having mandatory sustainability training during onboarding for new clubs is something that we need to really look at. During student leadership training, and also the promotion of alternative waste bins, return bins that we have had this year. These are things that students aren't aware of because, again, there was no signages around it. It wasn't very visible, and so making sure that these are made aware to students is definitely a priority. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wouldn't, I'm all up for training clubs to focus more on sustainability, but I don't think mandatory training is the way we need to go with. That has been something in the past. Every year there's something new introduced that's mandatory for the clubs, and it just keeps building up every single year. We need to change this approach. We're going into a very transactional relationship with them. Do more collaborative events with the club on Climate Week. We didn't invite other clubs. These are the stuff that actually gets execs to learn, not the Canvas courses.
Now we'll move on to follow-up question. I'm going to treat it as an audience question, so you'll have 30 seconds to answer this. What's a specific priority from ASAP or another sustainability plan that you would like to implement? We'll start with Jay, 30 seconds.
For me, the main priority is fighting food insecurity. AMS has food bank. We have some trouble with the funds available to it. But in the meantime, what admin office can do is make sure every single club that's fighting the same fight gets enough support. The 6th student station, it's an established club. They're outside the nest right now, so if any of you want to grab food after this, feel free to. But they also face problems with applying for grants and increased wait times for every booking. So there's a reason they're outside, not inside.
Go ahead.
So the specific line I would like to act on is to investigate procurement of ingredients from the UBC farm. There are a few student-run, sustainable, low-cost food outlets on campus, and I would like to see something similar replace Blue Chip when it moves. And if sourcing food locally, it comes from UBC farm, I think that is a great way to achieve that. Thank you.
The priority that I want to center on is under campus engagement, and it's really centered on collaborating with other UBC sustainability groups and Indigenous partners on campus, for our events. And again, this is something that I brought up in the beginning, but unifying our work. We shouldn't be, so departmentalized with the other things that are happening on campus. And so, collaborating with them, collaborating with student groups, clubs, and constituencies is definitely something that I want to prioritize.
Thank you, candidates. We'll move on to an audience question. So again, you'll have 30 seconds. What should the AMS's relationship be with Greek life organizations? We'll start with Kevin.
I think it's important to address all concerns of student groups, and that includes Greek life. The Panhellenic Society had their club status revoked, and this is a group of women that need to be supported. We need to ensure that they are safe and they have resources that they can use on campus. And similar with fraternities, they are another group that we need to collaborate with. Otherwise, we are pushing them aside and leaving them to deal with their own problems in potentially ineffective manners. Thank you.
I echo what my opponent has said. These are groups on campus that students engage with, and it doesn't really, it doesn't really help when we're just pushing them away. UBC Sororities is a club, and we are supporting them. And looking at, the IFC and looking how we can ensure that safety training and collaboration with them is done in order to, promote student living and promote safety within campus.
Jay?
Could you repeat the question, please?
What should the AMS's relationship be with Greek-like organizations, so sororities and fraternities?
Yeah, so I believe that sororities and fraternities are a big part of student life on campus, and we can't just ignore them because of stuff that has happened. Obviously, we need to focus more on having support where it's needed, but at the same time, we can't just ignore the problems. That's not the solution. We need to sit down, talk with them, and see how we can move forward, because ignoring is not going to get us anywhere.
Thank you, candidates. With that, I think we can end a little early tonight and move on to closing statements. We will start with Amy. You have 1 minute.
Yeah, so something that's really been thrown around with me by students and club executives is this word called institutional knowledge. And, it doesn't only mean knowing the policies and knowing the operations of the admin office, having worked here for 2 years, but it's also having the knowledge of the relationships that the AMS has with campus groups and student groups. Because I know which relationships we need to continue to foster and which relationships we need to continue to improve. The administration office takes on a lot of projects, and you work from day one, and you need someone who is aware of these operations and aware of the different projects being held in the admin office. Vote for Amy, vote AMyGoDown.ca, and that's my spiel.
Thank you. Jay, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, so just to end, we have over 60,000 students at UBC, and we still significantly lack school spirit. And I think this is something that the administration can fix. But all we need to have is someone who's willing enough to actually go out of their way to help every single student, every single club, and be willing to go to any extent to make sure they're getting what they need. AMS execs right now have no interest in going out, interacting with people, or participating in their activities, and understanding what they need from the AMS. And many clubs just view AMS execs out of their reach, because you can only get your stuff done if you know someone, same as I said before. But yeah, I would wish best of luck to both Amy and Kevin, and yeah.
Thank you. Kevin?
Student engagement is the heart of this campus. It takes proactive and effective leadership to ensure the over 400 clubs can continue to thrive as they face space limitations and an overcapacity booking system. Through my 6 years involved at UBC, I have always heard F the AMS, or why should I care about the AMS? And that's because they haven't had a reason to care. In my 6 years, I have not known until this year any of the AMS execs except for the president. And students should really know who the VP admin is, for reasons more than just dealing with issues. I will be that leader who gets to know clubs personally because I care about supporting them, and I am genuinely interested in learning about their communities. Above this, I will champion student engagement, I will champion collaborative sustainability goals, and ensure improvements to AMS businesses to ensure affordability and sustainability. As a club leader, I understand what is needed to run clubs, and I hope to do so as your next VP admin. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. And that concludes our second forum tonight. You can catch these candidates and all of the other debates back here on Thursday from 12 to 8 p.m. at the Great Debate. Thanks, everyone.
Yes. And it's been from